Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2025 library tour. In this episode, the beginning of the part of my library that I call Classics, Canonical, Modern, and Contemporary Fiction, Poetry, and Drama. This episode is going to be mostly about the anthologies, which I do not have alphabetized with the rest of this part of my library. Some of my anthologies are up here, which I tried to do a test run this morning to see if I could stand up to do that part, and no. So I went ahead and pulled those books down, as well as some books on these shelves here, which I think would be perfect for anthologies or something. Anyway, so I'll figure out what to do with those sections eventually, assuming this is where classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama will remain. But anyway, let's get talking about the books. So the first two anthologies are critical and theoretical anthologies that I had for college textbooks. I was an English Lit major, and so I took two courses on critical theory and criticism. So the first one from my undergraduate years is The Critical Tradition, edited by David H. Richter. So I rather liked, at the time, this anthology. It's basically, there are two parts. The first part is foundational critical theory up to the mid-20th century. From that point, part two breaks down critical theory by movement. So formalism, psychoanalytic theory, structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, new historicism, queer theory, feminist critical theory, post-colonial critical theory, so on and so forth. I have not really looked at this book in a very long time, or the other one either. I've largely used these as weights, although I might have a bit of a plan for Nonfiction November, but stay tuned for that. So the other critical anthology I have is the Norton Anthology, Theory and Criticism, which is edited by Leitch, Kane, Fink, Johnson, McGowan, and Williams. And I had this one for graduates, and I think this is just in chronological order with alternate contents where that it breaks it down into traditions. So yeah, I have those two. So a few years ago, there was a book tag called the Mooks and Gripes Bucket List, or something like that. And I mentioned wanting to read all of one of those two anthologies, and I never bothered to try, and I doubt very seriously if I actually ever will. And one of these days I might talk about that contradiction, but not today, because this is the library tour. Next up is not an anthology. It is Hans Christian Andersen's Fairy Tales, which I picked up almost 10 years ago with the intent of gifting it to one of my nieces as a birthday or Christmas present, although I ultimately decided against it because it is in pretty rough shape, and I have not gotten around to reading it myself. The next book that I'm going to talk about that's not an anthology is one of the books that have been in my collection for the longest time, and that is Legends of the World, edited by Richard Cavendish, which I picked up about 30 years ago from Barnes & Noble. So this is a collection of various myths and folk tales and fairy tales. I read it quite heavily when I was younger, when I first got it, but I haven't looked at it in quite some time. So, now back to the anthologies. First up is the Oxford Book of American Short Stories, edited by Joyce Carol Oates. So this anthology includes stories from I am blanking on his name and I feel horrible about it. Washington Irving to Junot Diaz. So I picked this book up a few years ago for one of my projects. For the last few years in July, I have attempted to read some American literature, mostly canonical fiction, although sometimes modern and contemporary literary fiction, poetry, and drama, which is usually my go-to when I'm dealing with like a national reading project or a History Month reading project or something like that. That's my usual go-to. And about 2 years ago, I wanted to do short fiction. And unfortunately at the time, I really did not enjoy this collection, this anthology. Maybe having a second go at it might improve things. We shall see. I'm not entirely sure when I would get to this, though. Let's put you back over here. Sticking with fictional or fiction anthologies, this is Anti-Story, edited by Philip Stevick. So this includes a number of stories that are rather experimental. And there are some pretty good stories in here. I particularly like the Heinrich Böll story and the Joyce Carol Oates story. Oh, and Keith Fort's story. And Eugene Ionesco I thought was pretty good too. So, yeah, I might revisit this at some point. Really need to think of some form of short story centric event. Maybe. Moving on to drama. This is a Greek drama which includes plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. It is edited by Moses Hadas. And so the plays included are by Aeschylus, Agamemnon, and Eumenides, with a summary of Koiphoroe. By Sophocles, Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Philoctete, with a summary of Oedipus at Colonus. By Euripides, Medea, Hippolytus, and Trojan women. And by Aristophanes, the frogs. So I picked this up, when I was in Austin. There was a charity shop or a thrift store that I went to because at the time there was like a Thursday event on Congress, which is where St. Edward's is, the university I went to, is located. And so there's a part of South Congress with a lot of, at the time, a lot of interesting stores. And they had a special Thursday every month. and me and some friends went to browse, and I picked this up from a thrift store. The next book is an anthology of drama as well, Forbidden Acts, edited by Ben Hodges. So this is an anthology of gay and lesbian drama in this 20th century. It includes God of Vengeance, The Captive, God of Vengeance by Shalom Ash, The Captive by Edward Bourdet, The Children's Hour by Lillian Hellman, Oscar Wilde by Leslie and Sewell Stokes, The Immoralist by Ruth and Augustus Goetz, The Killing of Sister George by Frank Marcus, Boys in the Band by Mark Crowley, which I have read and quite enjoyed, Bend by Martin Sherman, which I've actually seen performed live, as is by William Hoffman, and Love, Valor, Compassion by Terrence McNally. I picked this up when I was in San Francisco, about 19 years ago now, or will be going on 19 years ago this year. Next up is the Columbia Anthology of Gay Literature, edited by Byrne R.F. Spone. So this is a big anthology of gay literature that I've had for many years now. I've dipped into it occasionally. So moving on to poetry. These last two anthologies are poetry. First up is Word of Mouth, an anthology of gay American poetry edited by Timothy Liu. I've had this collection for over 20 years now. I love it. I picked it up the first time I ever went to Book People, the great independent bookstore in Austin, Texas. I went the spring semester of my senior year in high school. I went to go tour St. Edward's campus. And before we headed back home, I managed to cajole my mother into taking me to Book People, and where I picked this up. And I've had it ever since. Next is Queer Nature, edited by Michael Walsh. This is a poetry collection by queer poets that look at nature, and it is quite good. I really like this anthology. And finally, the Autumn House Anthology of Contemporary American Poetry, edited by Michael Sims, Quiliana Serto, Christine Stroud. So I picked this anthology up because Queer Nature is also from Autumn House. And I've dipped into this anthology many times since I picked it up last year. And quite a number of poets that I first read in this anthology have since come into my collection through their own collections, including Anne Marie Macari, Michael and Matthew Dickman, Tony Hoagland, Philip Levine, and many others. So I will be back tomorrow with the next part of the library tour featuring classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. Although I will be back shortly with an update to the changes to my library. So until then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.